Hi everyone, my name is Ellery Biddle and I am the Director of Global Voices AdVox project. Today we're doing our second hangout where we're focusing on a technology tool. We have decided to do a series of these because we're a community that uses a lot of different tools and that depends on them for all different kinds of communication and expression that we do ourselves. But we've noticed in recent years that we want to understand how tools work a little bit better and maybe using a language that is a little less technical than what we often see in the internet and within the digital rights space. So today I'm going to be talking with Mahsa Alimardani, our Iran editor, and she's going to have a conversation with two people who work with Lantern, which is a circumvention technology that has some really interesting new things happening, and they're going to tell us what that's about. Mahsa.
Well, yeah, so I work on Iran for Global Voices, and oftentimes I end up doing research and covering news of censorship. And so the reason why Lantern has sort of come under Global Voices' radar is because it's gained quite a bit of users inside of Iran, and it's become one of the more popular and talked about tools, especially right now with the release of Fire Tweet, which enables users to get directly to Twitter straight from an application on their phone. And so it's an exciting time to be talking with the Lantern team, and I will throw it to you, Adam, to sort of explain what this new tool does and sort of break it down in simple language for users.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so FireTweet started off really as an experiment at a hackathon that we were at in Spain, where we were trying to see could we get Lantern to run on Android, and from there could we build a sort of sample app, a prototype app that would do something useful. So basically, a Twitter app just jumped out at us as a good candidate, and we just decided to sort of launch forward with it. And at this really one-day hackathon, we were able to build just a first version of it that was able to send out tweets and read some tweets, and that was in early March, I guess. And since then, we've just been iterating on it and fixing bugs and stuff and improving the user experience. But basically, FireTweet is just an app on Android that allows you to use Twitter like you normally would, very similar to the Twitter app itself, but as if Twitter were unblocked in wherever you're tweeting from.
And has this changed experience for users in terms of speed? Like, they could easily log into a VPN and then log into the Twitter app, but now they skip this step. So I'm assuming it's a different experience.
Yeah, so exactly. So that's really the difference in the experience. So I think still for a lot of users, the idea of logging into a VPN that will proxy all of your device's traffic through that VPN is fairly advanced. So part of the idea behind FireTweet is that we sort of pre-package everything and do all of that for you. So all you need to do is just install this app and start tweeting without sort of worrying about the fact that you're in this censored region, and without having to sort of jump through all these hoops to get out of that censored region.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, and maybe Mariam, you can speak a little bit to this. There's some politics behind Twitter and how Iranian users can log into it, because oftentimes Iranians can't put in an Iranian local number or can't put in that they're from Iran when they subscribe as a user. So would this app help in any way?
Sure. Well, that's a Twitter issue, to be honest, and so we can't do much to get rid of it. But recently, apparently, it's become available to Iranians to put in the 98 code and put in their phone numbers, and also choose Iran as a country when they're verifying. So that was the main issue: is when you're registering as a user, you would have to put in your country, and Iran wasn't even on the list. And now it looks like that's been fixed as of last week, I believe, or about 10 days. And it's sort of coming into functioning now, and looks like it's working. So that's really good news for us, definitely, because that was getting in the way of people being able to register for the first time. And we're excited, too, because that means more people are getting on Twitter in general.
That's good. And do you have any particular security assurances for users who are using this app? Because oftentimes, especially for activists and people who are involved in politics, there's those kinds of concerns, especially when using tools like this.
Yeah, so I think there are some, sort of basic things that I think typically Iranians are very good at handling, like making sure that if you're tweeting, you don't use your real name. So especially on social media sites, that's just a very basic thing that I think tends to be the weakest point in sort of securing your end-to-end online activity. But beyond things like that, FireTweet itself is built on Lantern, that has all of its own sort of security properties in terms of just making sure that your traffic is encrypted, and we'll do things like Lantern uses this sort of hybrid architecture where we will basically use a variety of techniques to stay unblocked. So I should say first off that Lantern's primary goal is access. So our primary goal is just to keep the tool unblocked and keep anything built on top of Lantern unblocked. So we do that in a few different ways. One of those ways is via peer-to-peer. So a user in the uncensored world can be running Lantern or FireTweet, and in so doing can provide access to users in the censored world. Mm. So in that case, for example, one thing that Lantern will do is only send encrypted traffic, or only send there's sort of multiple layers of encryption really in Lantern, but only send end-to-end encrypted traffic through peers. So that basically limits what a peer is able to see on the Lantern network. So that's, for, I guess, a more technical audience, somewhat similar to like a Tor exit node, but if that Tor exit node were only providing access to HTTPS traffic. But the nuances of the how security works in the context of a place like Iran get fairly complex fairly quickly. So it's I'd be happy to dive into that more, but it's a bit of a quagmire because it depends a lot on the threat model that you're talking about and who your adversary is. And I think in Iran that's actually somewhat simpler because typically your adversary is the government.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to get back to this security issue, but just to go back to the whole structure of Lantern as a peer-to-peer network, it would be interesting to sort of explain how this is different from another circumvention tool that would necessarily work on rerouting you to an IP address.
Yeah,
another outside of the country, rather, an IP address.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess if you take VPNs as the most sort of common circumvention tool, basically what a VPN will do is send your traffic through this set of servers that the VPN itself runs. So on a basic level, the problem with that in the context of a country like Iran, where a government is actively trying to block the tool, is that those servers are easy to identify and easy to block. So what Lantern does is it again uses this sort of hybrid system where we also integrate peers into the network so that we do a few things. First, we just increase the number of IP addresses that a censor has to worry about in terms of blocking it. So, in an ideal world, if there are millions of users running Lantern in the uncensored world, that just vastly complicates the problem from the perspective of a censor trying to block the tool. So the Lantern peer-to-peer layer works in a couple of ways that get fairly technical fairly quickly, but that's the fundamental idea, is that we can decentralize access to the uncensored internet in a much sort of broader way to sort of up the ante for censors. Uh-oh. I think you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back on now. I'm just wondering how does Lantern build this network of different peers from around the world?
So yeah, so it does it in a couple of different ways, and so if you're in the uncensored world, the idea is that you can just run Lantern, you can download and install Lantern on your machine and run it, and when you do that, you just become this access point for users in censored regions. So basically, because you're able to access the open internet, users can access the open internet through your computer. And underneath, we do that in a couple of different ways. In the stable version of Lantern that's released, we do that through a trust network. So if you invite users to proxy access through you, then they'll be able to do that. So literally sending an email to a trusted contact will allow them to proxy access through your machine. And then Lantern also will do this sort of multi-hop thing where friends of friends will also be able to get access through your machine. Yeah.
So is there any risk at all of that network becoming infected, especially if an activist is online and someone from the Iranian government comes into this network?
Yeah, no question, no question. So that's similar, but also in terms of the details a little bit different from like a Tor exit node. So with Tor, everyone can run Tor and join the network. With Lantern, that's also the case, but you don't have this anonymity layer between each hop on the network. So with Lantern, let's say in the worst case scenario, a censor decides, okay, they want to run a bunch of these access points. Basically, they would be able to see encrypted traffic going from X person in a censored region to X website. So if that website is, let's say, Facebook, they would see access to Facebook from a bunch of different IP addresses in Iran, because Facebook is relatively popular in Iran, and they wouldn't know what that person was doing on Facebook. If it's a much less popular site where it's like someone's using some really obscure blogging platform, for example, there might be only one user in Iran using that blogging platform. So with a lot of this stuff, there's this element of sort of hiding in the crowd. So like first I would say, like if you're an activist who's doing really sensitive stuff, blogging on some website, that you think is going to potentially be very, very controversial and will make you a target, I would say Lantern is not the tool for you. So like again, Lantern's primary goal is access, and the reason it's not the tool for you is because you could have a censor looking at that traffic, in the worst case running as an access point, and seeing that you are going to this website, and maybe, especially if it's not a popular tool, guessing that this is you here posting this post, even if you're not using your real name. So there is some threat there. If you're just using Facebook, for example, to post something that maybe is even controversial, I think in practice the likelihood of a censor being able to say that this is your post versus this other post that happened 20 milliseconds later is very unlikely. But it's important to be sort of cognizant of the general threats. And I would say, as a general rule, if you're doing something that's potentially dangerous online, we would recommend using Tor.
And you mentioned trust, and do you collect a lot of data on your users, or is this something that is not done by Lantern?
So we collect as little data as possible. Right now we're at an interesting moment in the sense that we have the stable version of Lantern that's been out for a while, but all of our work for the last, probably at least 4 or 5 months has been on Lantern 2.0 betas. The earlier versions will record things like your IP address, or not your IP address, sorry, your email address, so that we can forward emails between users to establish the trust network. Mm-hmm. These newer versions of Lantern won't store anything at all. So in all cases, we try to store as little information as possible to make the tool work. But newer versions will store nothing at all unless you opt into logging. So if we have the option for you to report debugging data to us, like a lot of different software does, and if you check that box, then we will, like if some crash happens or something like that, it'll report it to us so that we can improve the software.
And is Lantern completely open source? Can someone quite techie log in and look through your code and criticize and make comments?
Yeah. It's all up on GitHub at GetLantern. We have a bunch of different projects in there, but the main one is just like github.com/getlantern/lantern, and that's linked from getlantern.org. Yeah.
Maybe I can send this over to Ellery. I think she has some more questions about FireTweet.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious, sort of going off of the questions about trust and people who participate with Lantern. What are the different groups of users that you think of as your core, when you're talking about the benefits and how you might use the tool and how you might, situations like you just said, Adam, where you wouldn't, if somebody was doing something highly sensitive, you wouldn't recommend that they use Lantern. I'm just curious just about your target users, but maybe also other kinds of users that you wouldn't have expected or might not even want using Lantern, but also FireTweet in particular.
Yeah, maybe I'll turn this over to Miriam in a second. But I guess the one thing that I would say is that for the most part, I think based on what I just said, there like most activity that you do online is not this like dangerous blogging, for example, or like potentially controversial blogging or tweeting or whatever. So even if you're an activist, most of the time you're not engaging in these sort of potentially risky behaviors. So Lantern is designed to be a super usable, super fast tool for everyone. But if you're doing something super dangerous, we would maybe recommend using Tor if you really feel you're at risk. But yeah, I don't know, Miriam, do you have any thoughts about that in terms of FireTweet in particular or Lantern?
No, I mean, I think what we're aiming at is access to information and getting people online. So we sort of see it like your daily life, your morning coffee and your morning dose of internet, right? And I kind of think of it as like Lantern's giving you that, it's like allowing or trying to help people be part of that sort of globalized routine, which is getting online and checking the news and checking your friends on Facebook and saying hi to your family and figuring out what's going on sites that are independent or not available. So that's how I always just sort of frame what we're aiming at. And then, like you said, Ellery, it can get into lots of other questions about just even accessing social media and the fear about that in Iran, and then also posting as the way that Adam was talking about, whether it's on a blog or having a campaign on Facebook. And then it gets into all those layers, and there's so much that needs to be done, I think, in a variety of ways to protect yourself in that situation, starting with changing the name, starting with making sure that you can't be detected, using things like Tor if you are doing campaigns and political things. I mean, even kind of non-political campaigns on Facebook are sort of an issue. So then you have to get way more sophisticated in how you engage with social media and online. But if we think let's get as many people as possible digesting and consuming the information that everyone does around the world, basically. I don't know.
That's great. Oh wait, there we go. I'm also curious about, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about Iran specifically and how the tool has been developed. I mean, my understanding is that Lantern was developed with a couple of really specific national contexts in mind. And I would be curious to know what happens when you start to look at a new place, or when how do you develop one framework with a particular place in mind, and then technology changes in different places, and suddenly, this becomes useful somewhere else too. And how do you think about that stuff?
I mean, I would say in general, we haven't consciously tried to target specific places that much, but sort of stepping back for a second, I would say that China is significantly more sophisticated than pretty much everywhere else. So if a tool works in China, it's going to work everywhere else pretty much, because the techniques that they're using are the techniques that everyone else is using, and then plus a bunch of other custom stuff. So a tool that works in China, and I would say Iran is sort of the second tier of that capability. So if a tool is going to work in China, it's almost certainly going to work in Iran, and if it's going to work in Iran, it's going to work most places. So our focus is just on staying unblocked and if we're able to do that in China, we're basically successful at doing that everywhere.
I'm curious, is China the model that you use to build your tools?
I mean, only in the sense that they have these specific capabilities that we need to get around. You know, so there's this sort of array of methods that censors have at their disposal, each of which we are very consciously targeting in terms of getting around it. And China has all of them, so because they have all of them, we sort of are targeting China, I guess, in some way. But really, we're targeting those techniques.
Well, I asked because you said that you developed FireTweet from an Iranian hackathon. So, and that's also something that I was wondering about, the scope of the work that focuses on Iran, because I know I've interacted with a number of your team members, and they all come from an Iranian background and Iranian experiences in NGOs and whatnot. So,
yeah.
Maybe Miriam could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. I mean, I think what we've done is, like, sort of what Adam was saying, is that, you know, we're trying to increase users, get this to as many people as possible, be creative about how we get Lantern out there, like in the form of FireTweet. And so, yeah, we have this team that's helping a lot with just getting it out there into the world and into the Iranian community. We're also doing, to be honest, doing the same with China. China picks up on stuff really fast. They're really out there and figuring out what the latest tool is, and all over the place. So they pick it up, you know, even with very little work towards users. But that's primarily just the desire to sort of get this out to as many people that need it as possible. And so that's why I think that's why the focus is on those two countries primarily, and in a large way on Iran right now, because it seems like, you know, with the numbers of people on the internet in these two places, particularly Iran, this is a major need, a major demand, I would say, across the board, with how much Iranians use the internet on a daily basis, to be honest.
If I can also go back to another one of the tools that perhaps Adam works on, and I'm not sure if you work on that either, Miriam, which is uProxy. And I know sometimes users are a little bit confused about what the difference is between uProxy and Lantern, because I know they are both developed by you and your team, Adam.
Yeah, so I should say we don't actively work on uProxy anymore. So I think the maybe the easiest way to understand uProxy is based on its initial origin. So it really emerged out of early conversations between Brave New Software and Google, and also the University of Washington, about how we might be able to do sort of similar things to what Lantern does, but all in the browser. So with the idea being that we would improve usability and a couple of other aspects of these tools, but the initial name for uProxy was Lantern 2.0. So it was always very consciously seen as using a very similar model, but bringing it into the browser. So at this point, we basically decided to pursue different directions in terms of uProxy focusing on the browser itself, and Lantern remaining this downloadable tool that you install that allows us to do some things that you can't do in the browser, while at the same time doing things in the browser has some of its own advantages. So at this point, we're sort of consciously pursuing different directions to see what really works.
Okay, but that's still one of the tools that your Lantern is associated with, or is that completely in the hands of Google now?
It's primarily in the hands of Google and University of Washington, and we'll certainly, you know, stay in touch. So if there are pieces that we can both use, we're always sort of on the lookout for like technical components that we can reuse between the two. Right now, there aren't any that we directly reuse, but there likely will be in the future.
Okay, interesting. And a lot of the discussions we had it with the previous tool tour as well, which is looking at the funding behind these, and if we can ask what exactly is the source of funding, and what What exactly is the background behind the support?
Yeah, so Lantern's almost entirely funded by the U.S. government, by the State Department, and so our first grant was through DRL, the Democracy or Department of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, and I think maybe the easiest way to me to sort of understand that is to understand their mission. Like I'm not going to be able to repeat this word for word, but basically their mission is to spread democracy and freedom of information around the world. And that's from our perspective, completely aligned with our own mission. So so we don't actually see. I mean, I think in an ideal world we would not receive government funding for exactly this reason, that it creates this question for users and for anyone sort of outside the project. But I think internally there's not really that conflict, because if you actually talk to people at the State Department, what they want is really very closely aligned with what we want. So I think in that regard, I would not think of the U.S. government as sort of this monolithic entity, but with this as an entity that has different missions, some of which are aligned with ours and some of which are not. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, with the outreach that you do into the community and with users, do you experience any sort of criticism for this funding, or are users generally just happy that your tool works and functions and gets what they want done?
Yeah, I honestly haven't heard anything yet at all. I mean, I'm fairly new to Lantern and the team, but in the little bit of time I've been there, that has been the least of users' concerns. They want fast internet now, I would say, and mainly email us about why this button isn't working, or why it's slowing down, or why it's this or that. So no, we rarely get asked those kinds of questions. Yeah, I think they're just interested in getting on.
I'm curious, just to follow up, has there, for those who are watching who aren't as clear on the technology, is there a way to see that a person has reached a website using Lantern? Or is there a way, like for a government surveillance program, to recognize the use of the tool? My sense is that it's difficult, but I actually don't know. But I guess I would be curious, like when I think about State Department funding, I mean, there are the stated goals that you mentioned, Adam, but then there's obviously the reputation of the State Department can't be divorced from the broader foreign policy agenda of the United States government, which is not always consistent with the values that that department espouses. So what I'm curious to know is, does the technology have reputational problems, and could it have repercussions for people in Iran or China or elsewhere who are using the tool because of that association with the U.S.?
So I think the key there is the issue that Mahsa brought up earlier about Lantern just being open source. So the way that Lantern works is freely available for anyone to sort of scrutinize and look at. I mean, I think our documentation could be better to make it even easier for users to understand, because obviously not everyone's a coder who can dive into the source code and understand it instantly. But I would say that's really the key element, where there's not some ability of the U.S. government to do anything that, or any other government to do something that's not sort of readily apparent in the code. I mean, I think the one threat there is the threat that we brought up earlier, where based on Lantern's architecture, anyone can run as a peer. Right, anyone can run an access point, and again, if you're a censor, you can run an access point and see users' traffic going to X site, right? And again, you won't see what's happening there, but if you're running, you'll see, this user sent a request to Facebook.com at this time, and when I say this user, I mean this IP address sent traffic to Facebook.com at this time. So that's certainly something to think about if you're a user in terms of what you're using the tool for specifically. Yeah, so I guess that's what I would say. I think in the future we'll likely add like a checkbox or something that will enable you to send all of your traffic just through us, because I think especially in Iran, this is definitely an issue that users worry about. If you're using our 2.0 betas as of like this moment today, actually all of your traffic will go through our servers, so none of it will go through peers, and it's basically just because it's still in the process of being built essentially. But the 2.0 betas that actually most people in Iran are using right now don't have that specific issue. But that is the threat if there is one.
That's great, and I wonder, has there been any criticism from the tech community at all in terms of any of your open source code or any feedback in that regard?
We've gotten feedback about our documentation, yeah, like that it would be nice if it were documented better, and it's one of those things where it's like we've gotten a little bit of feedback that people would like better documentation, but we've also gotten way more feedback that it would be nice if Lantern were faster, for example. So we basically handle feedback all sort of the same way. So and prioritize what we spend our time on based on essentially the volume of feedback. So if everyone wanted Lantern to be purple, we would make Lantern purple. But that's not the feedback that we're getting. So and we've put a lot of effort into documentation. So it's not horrible, but like for example, it's not all translated, and it's not all the process of automating the documentation, like getting the documentation from our code repository to our website, isn't fully fully automated. So that's the main criticism that we've gotten.
I see. Well, we will follow up this talk here with a post on Global Voices, and we will try to link to all of your documentation, and we hope to continue on this discussion with members of the community who are involved in this kind of work and the technical aspects of this work as well as the user side of things, and hopefully this discussion could go forward, and we look forward to staying in touch and doing more work with you both, and thank you both very much for taking the time to come and talk to us and to explain your tool. It's been educational, I'm sure, for all of us, and yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Adam, Mariam, and Ellery.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Ellery.
Thanks, guys.